Africa's commodity exporting economies, such as South Africa, Zambia, Ghana, and Zimbabwe, and others, have benefited from the price rally of the outgoing year 2025. However, the continent markets and finance executives say that the continent can gain more from its commodities by providing tradable derivatives for those underlying commodities assets, among other innovations that are urgently required. We want you to enjoy this panel on commodities and derivatives, which was held at the 2025 Asea Summit held in Kigali.
To be very simple, we come from agricultural countries. I come from an agricultural country, and in several years and in every year we see small farmers at harvesting time, they just drop the harvest because simply the price went down. The farming cycle takes around 4 to 5 months, so they actually do the investment at day zero at the hope that by harvesting their crops, they will have a decent price to sell their commodities. In many instances, especially in agricultural products, that is not the case. So this discussion may seem that we're diverting from the bread and butter of exchanges and what we're actually trying to do, but bear with me this. Sometimes we need to derive away from what we actually do to develop business for our own exchanges. And so the main aim of this discussion is how to create proper securities to be traded on our exchanges via derivatives products. In order to think into derivatives products, you need to look into the underlying asset. So the underlying asset is an agricultural product. So you need to look into the spot market of the agricultural product itself or the commodity itself. So in many instances, spot markets are very unorganized. It's left for the small players, the traders. The traders have vested interest not to declare the prices or to manipulate prices or to create monopolistic actions in their markets. It all affects the small farmer at the end of the day. How can we try to create that? Definitely commodity markets is there to provide transparency, to provide a place where everyone can come together. As an exchange, as a stock exchange, you come in as a stakeholder in order to try to organize with the different stakeholders on how to organize this commodity and this spot market. You'll find yourself being driven into areas of logistics and warehousing and transportation. Statistics here in Africa say at least like 30% or 40% of the production is being wasted due to logistics reasons, or there's no manufacturing processing for that products. But the idea is not new. It's creating derivatives for agricultural products, like look, for example, cocoa beans, which was the best performing asset class in 2024. And it dropped in 2025. So this is a very true example. And Africa, by the way, produces 70% of the world production of cocoa beans. And all of these contracts are being traded in ICE futures, whether New York or London offices. And we're not having that on our African platforms. We're not seeing that in African platforms. Same thing happening with our great friends in Ethiopia when we're seeing their coffee markets, for example. They're doing a fantastic job there. So the idea of commoditizing or creating derivative products on agricultural products is not new. It's been there and we've been seeing it. The idea is how to try to organize more products in order to provide the food security part. No, because you do not eat soybeans or coffee for food every day. So you need to go into wheat, into tomatoes, into mangoes, into everything like that. So creating this and organizing a commodity market would allow you to create a derivative product that is secured with an underlying asset, and you can see that the spot market is there. Because at the end of the day, at the expiry date of the contract, the price of the contract will equal the spot market. So the spot market has to be stable, transparent, and out there. So this is in very simple discussion why we're here and why we think we need to be derived into helping out creating commodity markets in our local economies.
Yeah, in Botswana, we are establishing the Botswana Mercantile Exchange, which is a multi-commodity exchange, both for soft commodities and hard commodities. But we are also taking a regional approach, working closely, for instance, with Nick and the government of Zambia, we've signed a bilateral agreement where we will be co-hosting and creating scale through a regional commodities exchange. And what we are really solving for is what Remy was alluding to. So if you look at Botswana, just to take an example, the current price, maximum price that a farmer can get for beef, which is one of the key things that we export to Europe and the UK, is £5 per kg. But if you look at the actual trading price of beef in those markets to the end user, we are talking north of 15 pounds. Mm. So now you start to see the disparity. And typically it's because when you have intermediaries and middlemen who are trading and getting the margin at the expense of the farmer, you can't create true wealth for the primary producers. Okay. So we really want to make sure that we give value to the farmers. But we also want to make sure that, especially in the non-soft commodities, in the mining side, where we have quite a lot of minerals, we wanted to ensure that the value chains of these commodities are beneficiated in Africa. And we are able to get the right price realization, but also ensure that over and above that, we create incentives of processed secondary commodities on the Botswana Mercantile Exchange to drive the beneficiation. Obviously, it's early days, but that's also a key part. Then the third part of it is we believe that, the previous panel was talking about regional integration and investing across borders. One of the key things that we're also solving for here is to acknowledge that different geographies or different countries are endowed with different commodities. And therefore, creating a platform that plays to the strength of an individuality of each geography is important. For instance, we know that in Zambia, they are very, very good at producing maize, and we buy a lot of our maize from Zambia and South Africa because we finish off our cattle for the beef market. But these current setups are very fragmented. The farmers in Zambia are not getting the real value for the maize that's being fed to cattle in Botswana. So through this, we are able to start getting that transparency. And the Botswana Commodities Exchange is a subsidiary of the Botswana Stock Exchange. It's a 100% subsidiary there. But we are obviously in parallel driving the risk management products on the Botswana Stock Exchange to help de-risk the farmers, lock-in prices, and all that.
The understanding is that you're sorting out the spot side of things first for you to be able to securitize the spot to the exchange. How did you finance that, or is it an expensive undertaking from where you sit as an exchange?
Yeah, establishing a commodities exchange is quite expensive. We took an approach of starting with the spot, trades, primarily because they already exist of the system. So I talk about the billions every year that go through for beef trade. We talk about the vegetables, we talk about the grain, and all those other things. So the first step is really to formalize those onto the platforms, and then naturally generate flows to make sure that we are able to keep improving other product sets and the sophistication of our products. But one other thing that was also important is when we started this journey, the first thing that we did is that we sat with policymakers, right from the top of the house, the state, the heads of state for Botswana and for Zambia, and we needed to make sure that there is alignment from the outset, from a policy point of view. Gotcha. So we fast-tracked some policies, making sure that there are some directives in terms of when the platform is ready, these are kind of products that will be traded on the platform immediately on day one. And that's important, because if you learn from some of the failures we've seen of commodities exchanges across Africa, was primarily because there wasn't that policy support. You would have an exchange, but people were running out of and trading bilaterally outside the exchange.
Correct.
And that really led to low volumes, lack of price discovery because of lack of liquidity, and so on and so forth. So we are also quite blessed to be working with some international global commodities exchanges that will give us max access to, global traders and bigger pools of liquidity.
How do we strengthen the capital markets to create value for the local investors around that space, based on your experience, Michael?
So I think African natural resources wealth, I think they can, and they should be translated into financial wealth. And I think for all Africans. And I think the best way to go about doing that is to actually strengthen our capital market. I mean, today, Africa is the holder of most strategic minerals. We're talking about gold, we're talking PGM, manganese, we're talking about various other things, but more importantly, we also talk about agricultural potential. So, and you'll find that most of those minerals we have, the value is being extracted and it's processed, and it's value for foreign markets and foreign investors. So we do very little. I think we need to change that. And I think to change that, we need to shift from the mindset of being the exporter of mineral resources to become the builder of investable ecosystem. That idea is already happening. We're already seeing it in Africa, where they are pioneering innovative products like ETF, for instance, that are giving exposures to gold, to PGMs. We also see commodity-linked instrument, and so on. So those instruments, they actually provide a much more efficient access for investors to access capital market. So they democratize market. For instance, a teacher in Nairobi, or a young investor in Nigeria, it doesn't have to actually own shares in a company to benefit. Yeah. They can just use the phone to buy those ETFs, which is actually very simple. And by doing that, basically what it does, it means to say that this instrument democratize the access to capital market, it deepens the capital market, which is obviously good for the market. It brings about liquidity into the market. And I can share some example. We've got these ETNs and ETFs listed across various parts of the continent. I think one good example is my neighbor here in Botswana. So we've got new gold ETF, which is basically, I think, play a critical role, not only for investors to benefit, but also it deepens the market. It is one of the most traded company in exchange.
Sustainability with regard to the commodities ecosystem refers not only to how we produce, basically how we extract or how we grow, but also really to the reliability of the supply chains themselves, the ability to meet demand, but also the pricing, which affects profitability, and also the adaptability of the people in that ecosystem to either the demands of the consumer or the needs of the investor, but also the integration of innovation. So largely what you find is that the commodities markets are largely very either reactive, vulnerable, but also very extractive. And that has to change if indeed we are to set the prices for our commodities and not to take the price from what is given to us by whom we export to. And this can only come with the mind shift change that was talked to in the other panel, that talks to how we produce in a regenerative manner, but also that we actually adopt innovation and technology to add value to what we produce. In fact, what you find is that we export raw and processed primary commodities with no value add to ourselves. So the benefit of value add is with someone else.